G'day guys and gal. The Horus Heresy was a complicated time. A lot, and I mean a lot, of major things happened which ended up creating the final result. Did you know that the entire Ultramarine Legion was saved by the desperate actions of a World Eater, Space Wolf, Thousand Sun, and an Ultramarine? However, arguably the most pivotal event in the entire heresy, the event that doomed mankind to only ever be able to achieve a Pyrrhic victory in the best case scenario, was the burning of Prospero. A bunch of mistakes, misunderstandings, and retardation that decimated 2 legions and turned one of them to the traitor's side. It was the mother of all fumbles. But before we talk about wolves murdering the shit out of Egyptian wizards, the 400k Majorkill merch drop is live right now. We got hoodies in both black and burgundy, featuring a custom design on both the front and the shoulder. It also has a special message on the back that you'll be able to read when you pick one up. All hoodies are unique in that they have like what number they are on the sleeve. Then there's t-shirts that follow a similar vibe and come in the same colors. This drop is very limited. Only 400 shirts and hoodies available, and considering last merch drop sold out within 6 hours, and a lot of this has already been bought by people who signed up for pre-sale, I'd say get in quick if you want to be a part of history. Today we'll go over the burning of Prospero, the setup for it, why it happened, the effects it had on the setting, and whose fault it actually was. Let's get into it. Before we understand how everyone went full retard, we gotta understand why. The Space Wolves and the Thousand Suns have despised each other since the early days of the Great Crusade. This is due to the Space Wolves' hatred of sorcery and witchcraft, which the Thousand Suns got pretty fucking moist about. The Thousand Suns in turn hated the Space Wolves for being massive assholes about their use of the warp, as well as their massive hypocrisy. See, the Wolves use rune magic as a low-level form of warp power they used to create special weapons and have minor impacts on the battlefield. The Wolves claim that the magic comes from Fenris, so it isn't tainted by the warp, which is, kind of bullshit since pretty much all magic comes from the warp. Lehman and Magnus had nearly gotten into a punch-on over this debate. However, when the Emperor condemned Magnus and banned the use of the warp as a weapon during the Council of Nicaea, it vindicated the Space Wolves and made them feel righteous in their hatred of the Thousand Suns. The Thousand Suns, on the other hand, thought the Council of Nicaea was some absolute bullshit, the Emperor caving to the will of the ignorant in order to appease them rather than him genuinely wishing the outlaw of the use of the warp. After all, who was a greater psyker than the Emperor himself? As such, the Thousand Suns continue to practice sorcery, however they begun doing it in secret. With Magnus now really full of himself about his warp power, he scries into the future and he sees that Horus will most likely turn to chaos. As a last-ditch effort to stop this, he astrally projects himself into Horus's artificial dream that came about when Horus was put into a coma from being wounded with a lethal chaos knife. After Magnus navigates through Horus's strange wet dream fantasies that mostly involve people rubbing his shiny bald head, he finds Horus and does his best to tell him that Erebus is a fucking shithead and that selling your soul to the forces of hell is a bad idea. Horus, in his brilliance, disagrees, embracing chaos and becoming its weapon. Magnus is like, well fuck, time to warn daddy. However, with the distance of Prospero to Terra, as well as chaos stirring up the warp to make it hard to communicate via astropath, Magnus didn't have an easy way of warning the Big E, so he performed a hectic ritual to project himself into the palace. The ritual was a success. However, it blew open the psychic wards that were protecting the Emperor's Webray project, humanity's only chance of beating chaos, wide open. Hence, Magnus's warning didn't really get heeded as he had just fucked over everyone and the ritual killed a lot of people. This had been planned all along by Titsnitch, who wanted Magnus to know that Horus was turning traitor. If Magnus had avoided sorcery, then none of this would have happened, so there's definitely a lesson to be learned here. The Emperor was furious. He summoned the Space Wolves and ordered them to go to Prospero and grab Magnus, bringing him back to Terra for the mother of all spankings, as well as to help him fix the Webray project. Now, a lot of people think the Emperor was a bit of a spurg brain for sending the Wolves. If you wanted to bring Magnus back alive, why send the one legion who would be most likely to kill him? Well, yes, we could just call the big man a retard and call it a day, but if we actually think about it, it does sort of make sense. Magnus had just disobeyed the Emperor's edict, destroyed the Emperor's Webray project, all while fanatically yelling about Horus, the Emperor's chosen son, about being a traitor. Something was wrong with Magnus and he genuinely could have gone full warp spaz mode. The Wolves were extremely loyal to the Emperor, had experience fighting Astartes, and would do what was necessary. If Magnus wasn't going to come quietly, then there was really no other better legion who could defeat the Thousand Suns, slap Magnus in some cuffs, and bring him to Terra. The Emperor also sent his Custodes and Sisters of Silence led by Valdor to back up the Wolves and act as his representative. Overall, he had to be careful as the other legions he could have sent would either be unable to beat the Thousand Sons, be unwilling to fight them, or might even be sympathetic and join them. The only thing that really did fuck everything up was Horus intercepting Russ and more or less giving him orders to kill Magnus, manipulating him into thinking it was the Emperor's will. Even with these new orders from his Warmaster, Russ was still hesitant to just murk his brother. To Magnus's credit, he knew he fucked up pretty bad and was more than willing to accept his punishment, even if that meant death. Unfortunately, he believed that the best way to do this was to cut off the planet from communication, lower his defenses, and send his fleets away, meaning his legion would be unprepared for an attack. What he should have done is stand down and surrender to any approaching Imperial fleet. Examples like this are why the Magnus did nothing wrong crowd are a bunch of fuckwits. Lehman tried again to hail Magnus and ask for his surrender, but after more silence, he decided it was time to act, launching his invasion. The start of the invasion was brutal for the Thousand Sons. They were taken completely by surprise, with their orbital defenses being obliterated in short order. Once they got their bearings and formed a defense, the battle began to even out. Sure, they were outnumbered, but Psyker powers are overpowered as shit. If it wasn't for the presence of the Custodes and Sisters of Silence, the Wolves would have been pretty fucked. To be able to even remotely match the Imperial onslaught, the Thousand Sons all had to overcharge, basically revving their engines on first gear. As a result of this, a shitload of them would become godlike in power for like 10 seconds, and then either turn into a chaos spawn or legit just explode. In a particularly cool moment, 6,000 Sons of Magnus went up against Valdor and 500 Custodes and Sisters of Silence. Within minutes, every single Thousand Son had been killed, with Valdor personally taking on 30 of their best bladesmen by himself at the same time, killing all of them and suffering only a single cut in return. Jesus fucking Christ. Speaking of Valdor, why didn't he stop Russ from attacking? He knew the Emperor's will better than anyone. Well, Valdor tried. Just before the attack, he literally said, "There's still time to take him back to Terra. We don't need to attack." And he got into a pretty big argument with Lehman. Lehman was being a dick and tried to claim that Valdor wasn't a true son of the Emperor like he was. So how would he understand the Emperor's will? Valdor nonchalantly told Lehman that his logic was flawed, but he did accept that he was there to assist Lehman, not lead the expedition, so he relented and joined in on the invasion. Onto something funnier, the Space Wolves' dislike of helmets proved to be a massive issue, as the Thousand Sons were lining up a shitload of headshots, making the Wolves drop with only one shot each. The more I read about the burning of Prospero, the more it seems like Russ, the Custodes, and Sisters of Silence carried the shit out of the war, whilst the Space Wolves were just running around howling at shit and getting their brains blown out. Eventually, the Sons will push back to their final pyramid. At this point, Magnus is like, well, now would be a great time to come out and fight, wouldn't it? Not like before when we had a chance to, just like surrender. Hence Magnus strode forth and Harry Pottered this bitch, casting all kinds of devastating spells. Both legions had gone all out. The Wolves had even unleashed their Wolfen, but now it was time for the Primarchs to fight. Magnus understands the rule of cool, so he generated a lightning cage around him and Lehman to have a sick 1v1. To Magnus's credit, he was low-key winning the fight, having to occasionally distract himself by helping his sons in the battle, as well as Lehman's wolves taking a big bite out of his leg. He even punctured one of Lehman's hearts. However, he got his remaining eye cut out for his trouble, then he had his spine shattered over Lehman's knee, Bane style. With his final thought, Magnus accepted Titsnitch's aid, with him and his surviving legion being teleported to safety. Of the entire legion, only just over 1,000 Thousand Sons remained. How thematic. Magnus's soul was shattered, which benched him for most of the Horus Heresy. This conflict, as well as his soul shattering, turned Magnus from a noble yet naive loyal son to a mustache-twirling villain and pawn of chaos. The Emperor would try and bring Magnus back to his cause later in the Heresy, but it wouldn't work out. So whose fault was the burning of Prospero? It's everyone's. The Emperor should have sent a more level-headed legion, such as the Ultramarines or White Scars, to bring Magnus back to Terra. Magnus should have told his sons about the incoming Imperial fleet, and that they must go with them to Terra to make amends. Russ should have waited and tried harder to hail Magnus before launching his unprovoked attack. Some credit definitely does go to Horus and Chaos's influence, but overall, the blame lies 90% on Magnus and Lehman. Both of these characters could have made a dozen different decisions that would have resulted in a bloodless encounter, and Magnus returned safely to Terra. Instead, we got an out-of-position Space Wolf Legion, a decimated Thousand Sons Legion who just turned traitor, the Emperor stuck on the Golden Throne without Magnus to help fix the webway, and Magnus now a comical villain. If Prospero was never burnt, the Loyalists would have achieved a very decisive victory over the the traitors, leading to a golden age of mankind as we ascend to become a psychic race under the guidance of the Emperor of Mankind and his right-hand man, Magnus the Red. But no, everyone just had to go full retard. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up the 400k merch. By my estimate, it'll sell out at most within like 48 hours, but who actually knows? So be sure to check it out and see if it's still available. Hit the subscribe button, then hit the real subscribe button for more spicy, flaming hot content. Join the Discord for more memes, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.